Whenever you think of action, what's the first thing that pops in your head? Is it epic, intense, or hype? Maybe it's the music filled with those grand choral vocals, the insane choreography, or ridiculous stunts. Physics-defying badassery lend an action sequence its sense of cool, but that doesn't make it great. No, to truly stand out on a meaningful level, action needs weight. Physical and emotional weight. The Winter 2016 anime Grimgar, A Fantasy in Ash clearly demonstrates the importance of weight in action, showing how a little realism and meaning can take a fight from this to this. Grimgar has thoroughly surprised me with its meaningful story about coping with grief, learning to make new bonds, and surviving in a foreign world. The level of thematic depth far surpasses any other series in its worn-out, tropey genre, and perhaps most importantly, there's not a harem in sight. Though the same can't be said for occasional fanservice. Part of why it's worked so well is the way it's executed those themes. Let's look at the first major action sequence of the series in episode 2. To this point, the characters awoke in this strange video game world with no recollection of how they got there or where they came from. With no other choice but to learn to live in their new environment, they began their training to become real adventurers. In this scene, we get our first taste of what it really means to survive in this kill-or-be-killed world, as the party takes on their first enemy, a single, low-level goblin. Carefully crafted shots of the goblin immediately give it a sense of humanity, from the way it fills its canteen to the familiar camp setup with others of its clan. With our characters the aggressor, Grimgar's already set this up as not a good guys versus bad guys fight. It's not such a simple dichotomy. As complete novices to this world's mechanics, the characters struggle to kill their highly overmatched opponent, swinging at nothing and sending magic spells whizzing through the air. Here you can see the first, more surface-level weight in action: physical. Haruhiro's quick cuts with his dagger match what you'd expect from such a light weapon. Ranta's strikes with his sword, meanwhile, feel much harder and longer, to the point where he accidentally sticks it in the ground. Contrast that to Moguzo's much larger sword, which he can barely control, sending short jabs and long, slow swipes the quicker goblin can easily avoid. Physical weight lends the fight a sense of realism, which helps drive home our character's incompetence. If Moguzo could swing his sword with the same speed in one hand as Haruhiro's dagger, we wouldn't buy it. Lack of physical weight breaks suspension of disbelief and leaves the fight feeling decidedly fake. Moving forward, we see the second crucial component: emotional weight. When Ranta finally lands a hit, he's shaken by the reality of the situation. All of a sudden, this is no longer a game. The goblin is a living creature fighting to survive, much like the rest of them. Next, the goblin stabs Haruhiro. The shot lingers closely on his stunned, grimacing face with the sword embedded in his shoulder in full focus. Desperation on both sides set in as Haruhiro yells much in the same way as the goblin. In the course of a few minutes, our protagonist has been reduced to the same level as this enemy, both living beings desperate to survive. With the fight seemingly over, the chaotic music stops as Ranta worries about collecting his reward. Already we've seen how real a battle in this world is. This is a fight to the death after all. There's nothing pretty or noble about it. At some point, it devolves into a desperate attempt to survive. This fight isn't over though, as the goblin makes one last haunting effort to live. The encounter leaves the party horrified and visibly shaken. Grimgar contrasts its light pastel color palette with the dark red color of its blood, emphasizing the cold reality of survival in this world. It doesn't shroud the look of pain on a goblin's face when it's killed. When one of their comrades dies, it happens so quickly the characters hardly have time to react. Their effort to cope with the grief affects them throughout the series. It's a pain that doesn't just go away with a few episodes. Grimgar's action sequences carry a realistic weight which leaves a lasting impact beyond the banal, "cool fight, bro." For another example of how this weight, or lack thereof, affects action, let's switch gears to one of the most popular franchises in anime, Fate, starting with Ufotable's Fate Zero. In the first major action sequence of the series between Saber and Lancer, we again see physical weight at work. Lancer's lighter movements with his lances contrast Saber's heavier, stronger strikes with her two-handed longsword, leaving her at a major speed disadvantage, which she narrowly avoids. With the superb use of sound effects and animation, you can feel the power behind each jab. This fight doesn't just have physical weight, it's the basis of every action. While Lancer's lighter weapon allows him to deal much quicker strikes than Saber, it'll likely take more than one hit. On the other hand, if she can land just one blow with her heavier, far more powerful sword, she'll win. Of course, Fate being what it is, Lancer's noble phantasm is capable of cutting through mana, like Saber's magically woven armor. She later decides to counteract this by shedding her armor, and therefore the excess weight, allowing her to move much quicker. Again, her strategy backfires when Lancer uses his concealed weapon, which deals permanent damage, to cut her left hand, rendering it useless. Where Grimgar used its physical weight to highlight the character's novice ability, Fate Zero here makes it the driving force of the fight, informing the character's strategies and revealing their styles so that we know what to expect from future battles. Most of Fate Zero's action sequences employ this chess game tactical style, from Saber's attack on Rider to Kiritsugu's climactic fight with Kirei. Not every battle uses physical weight to the strategic level of this first one. Nevertheless, they all share one thing. Whether it's an attempted kill shot or merely one to reveal more information about the opponent's identity and fighting style, Fate Zero doesn't waste a move. The only fight which clearly stands out as a "yeah, we just did this because we thought it would look cool" is the Gilgamesh vs. Berserker dogfight. To see how a lack of weight affects an action sequence, let's move forward to Ufotable's Fate Stay Night Unlimited Bladeworks adaptation. Some of UBW's earlier fights, in particular the Saber Berserker bout, demonstrate what I mean by physical weight. Berserker's sheer size would make it seem like he's a slow but powerful foe, yet in reality, his agility stat is one of the highest in the series. His quick movements and sharp swings of his axe sword leave Rin and Shiro stunned and Saber at a significant disadvantage. Berserker can swing such a huge weapon like a feather because he has that much strength, and UBW uses that very weight to reveal his surprising agility. In Grimgar, Moguzo being a normal person obviously shouldn't be able to do the same. Lack of weight really becomes an issue when your everyday Joe Schmo starts jumping tall buildings for no discernible reason other than looking cool. In Shiro's climactic fight with Gilgamesh, for example, he quickly obtains superpowers as he dodges Gil's attacks by moving at a supersonic speed and leaping 50 feet in the air. Shiro's weightlessness could be enough to break your suspension of disbelief, though the fight does an excellent job of distracting you with massive amounts of hype and badassery, thanks in part to that sweet Emiya soundtrack. Shiro vs. Gil is mostly flashing lights and explosions. I won't criticize it too much though, because this is the right style for UBW. The flash of Unlimited Bladeworks vs. Gate of Babylon works as a fitting climax for this series, giving us a classic David vs. Goliath type fight, with Gil arrogantly underestimating his foe until it's too late. More often than not, however, too much flash leaves a fight scene decidedly empty. To better understand what I mean, allow me to completely shift gears away from the realm of anime to a little-known sci-fi franchise you may or may not have heard of: Star Wars. The climactic duel between Luke and Vader in Empire Strikes Back perfectly demonstrates the power of emotional weight in an action sequence. With only the chilling sound of Vader's labored breathing, you can feel the fear as Luke approaches the Sith Lord. Lucas chooses to go without music for the duration of the fight, minus a brief use of the Imperial March when Vader unleashes the power of the Force. The effect significantly heightens the tension, something J.J. Abrams similarly employs at the emotional climax of The Force Awakens. At the start of the fight, the difference in power between the two is abundantly clear. Note how Luke wields his lightsaber with both hands compared to Vader's more relaxed one-handed stance. Luke's lack of confidence leaves his attacks weaker, easily allowing Vader to push him back. As the fight continues and Luke controls his fear, his attacks grow stronger, and now it's him pushing Vader back. Meanwhile, as Vader gets frustrated, his attacks become frantic and heavy, making him the aggressor. Note how he's using both hands now. His anger leaves him vulnerable, but ultimately Luke can't match Vader's power, and he's beaten. It's one of the most iconic fight scenes of all time, and yet there's no music, no insane choreography, and hardly any dialogue. Instead, it relies on the tension created by the changing emotional and physical weight of the fight. Now I want to flip over to the prequels for a moment. No! Relax, we're not going there yet. First, let's look at the final fight between Luke and Vader in Return of the Jedi. The theme of this fight is Luke's struggle to control his anger and reject the dark side. The Emperor's theme perfectly plays on the rising emotion behind the fight, growing louder whenever they put the full power of the dark side on display. It all comes to a head when Vader threatens Leia and Luke's anger gets the better of him, sending waves of heavy, wild strikes as the low music swells in the background. Luke's ultimate burst of anger defeats his father and pushes him to the brink of the dark side before he brings it back under his control. This is physical and emotional weight combining to produce an impactful moment and one of the series' most lasting. The prequels' duels instead rely on the flash I lamented earlier. Are they cool? Absolutely. Fun? Hell yeah. Impressive? I certainly couldn't do that. But they lack the same emotional impact of the originals because they don't carry the same weight. Sure, the choreography is absolutely mind-blowing, but most of it is frivolous spins and flips inserted for the purpose of looking badass. Where the originals used its duels as an extension of the emotion of the moment, the prequels' fights depend entirely upon John Williams' insanely kick-ass soundtrack and the complex choreography. Note, melodrama, bad writing, and flashy twirls do not equal a good fight. J.J. Abrams in Force Awakens went back to the franchise's roots, going with the same style that made the original's fights so memorable. Between Grimgar, Fate, and Star Wars, I hope you've seen not just why weight is so crucial to an action sequence, but the many different ways you can use it. Grimgar stands out as a series because of its thematic exploration and realistic emotional core, neither of which you see too often in this genre. Its action sequences are then a product of that emotion. The characters' movements and responses give the action a level of realism which perfectly complements the emotion behind it all. As the series wears on and Grimgar's characters grow stronger, it's okay for them to handle low-level opponents with relative ease because they've worked to get there. Don't present a protagonist as an underdog only to magically give them impossible, godlike abilities. Grimgar understands this and smartly uses its action to further its themes and emotion. It's a slow-burning character drama with extended sequences where not much happens in the way of plot. That may be a turnoff for some, but regardless, its realistic character growth and thematic exploration are undeniable. Grimgar demonstrates how to properly execute an action sequence by lending it physical and emotional weight, which ultimately leaves it far more impactful than the Flash I'm used to. With the examples we've seen, there's a number of ways a show can use weight to its advantage, and hopefully, more series start to catch on, giving us action sequences that leave you saying more than just hype. And that'll do it for me. Don't forget to go vote on which series you want me to review in the month of April. You can choose as many as you want, but keep in mind only the top 4 will get reviews. The link to the poll is in the description. If you're feeling particularly generous and want to help me make better content, please consider checking out my Patreon page. Any help goes a long way. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and feel free to follow me on Twitter at UTS Reviews. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.